living proof. It's pretty safe to say, God give it, God take it away. It's the worldwide American way. I'm living proof.
What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm coming at you with a state of the metagame talk. It's something that I've been wanting to do, but if you don't know me that well, I'm pretty much a perfectionist when it comes to stuff that I want to put out there, and I just didn't feel comfortable with it, what I had gathered up previously, and I held off on it. But I think I kind of got it together to where I can present it to you guys in a coherent fashion that hopefully it gets across what I want to get across. What I'm going to do today is that I'm going to go into talk about what the current decks are, the current tier 1 and tier 2 decks are, based on the criteria that I use when it comes to evaluating decks. This is going to be based on the Japanese meta because they just got the new Link Joker booster that just came out, and that's definitely going to cause a shakeup, I feel. So I want to go through what has been tier 1 and tier 2, and then kind of talk about those, and then go into what I think is going to be tier 1 and tier 2 once the metagame settles with the Link Joker stuff being incorporated. So how do I define tier 1 was where I want to start. And for me, the tier 1 decks, after looking at the Japanese tournament scene, they're the decks that most consistently win naturally. But it's also taking into account like the card pool restrictions. The decks here like take the biggest advantage of what they have available to them, and generally they have some element about them that's exploitative or exploitative that they can use to help push them over the top, which aids into their win percentage, their consistency, their ability to keep the meta beneath them, if that makes any sense. And for tier 2, they're the decks that, given what is perceived to be tier 1, they contain an element about them where they can compete against the tier 1 decks while also remaining afloat in that tier 2 mix. But they have something about them where they just can't break through into that tier 1 category, whether it's like a consistency factor, whether it's like just a matchup against some of the other tier 1 decks, things like that. So with that in mind, I wanted to go into what I think are the tier 1 and tier 2 decks as of the Link Joker set coming out. So for tier 1, we have Luard, which naturally with set 12, they just got Drag Strider, which brought them back into the tier 1 mix because it gave them a viable finishing option. And they have that nature being able to grind out and just draw massive hand thanks to Owl, Orgeizers, and then be able to finish you off with the Drag Striders or Phantom Blaster if they still have it, or Spectral Diablo if they have that as well. And then there's Blade Wings, usually featured with the Enigmatic Assassin combo with Demigod, so that way they can just soul charge their whole deck, and then they can spit out assassins that can attack for upwards of 40,000 and just combo that off with a series of attacks. Then if that element of it doesn't work, they can follow that up with Bladdermouth, and then they can just filter their deck all the way down, restock it with grade 0s, and then potentially hit you with 4 triggers over top of the head. And then there's also Zodiac Time Beast, which as of set 12 officially superseded Time Leap as the go-to Gear Chronicle deck, and they're just a more consistent, explosive Gold Paladin deck where they can get attack, multi-attack, pretty much have selective top calls, maybe top 3, or search out through Time Leap, call them out, keep attacking, and then they can follow that up with all their myriad of restanding options that they have in their G zone, whether it's next stage, Gear Groovy, Gear Next, Beyond Order Dragon. They're just able to finish it off with a series of explosive restanding options just to overwhelm the opponent. And finally, what I think brings up is in the tier 1 ranks is Battle Sisters. thanks in large part to Ichikashima, but also aided by the early game that you can be afforded thanks to the Battle Sisters not being generation break restricted, such as Sable, Nanase, Coquette, things like that that can just keep filtering out their deck and putting on pressure because they can call something, they can draw, call something else, just keep up that pressure on you. And then when you either defended your hand down really early or they accumulate a lot of damage on you, they can then hit you over the top with Ikikashima either once or twice or 3 times, upwards of 4 times in the same game. And they kind of just drain you and break you down in that form or fashion. And then as for grade 2s, we got, or not grade 2s, as for tier 2, we got blasters, which were tier 1 up until set 12, but then it kind of got knocked down a peg thanks to just better options coming from Battle Sisters and Luard getting that big finish that they like. They're probably considered that top of the tier 2. Like if I don't like 1.5 as a tier option, I'd rather just put in 2. And if I did have a tier 1.5, this would probably be the very definition of it, where it's like in that weird middle ground between being not quite tier 1 but probably too good for tier 2. But I just put in tier 2 in that fashion. Wiseman, just because the loop is incredibly strong. Night Rose, just for her consistent options of being able to attack. She still has the Negro Lily combo with Cannoneer to be able to pop off on certain attackers. 7 Runner, the deck that doesn't die, still is being held up by Night Spinel, just being an insane card. But Battle Sisters having that early game option, and then most of these decks being able to attack early and often because they have lower grade 3 counts, being able to be more aggressive can help keep pace with the 7 Runner decks. Crazy 8, my personal favorite. It has that element of just the second stride GB8 is incredible, and usually can get there as of second stride, and if not, maybe third stride. It sits in that tier 2 category because it has that consistency problem of having the mechas or having the follow-up option if it doesn't work, but it's still an incredibly strong deck. I also put Blade Master in tier 2 just because they have that element of Ziegenberg, aka Goaty, just because he's a really efficient restander because it's not difficult to retire your opponent's field to make him a free restander, and being able to utilize him multiple times in the game can help recoup advantage. And they have decent power columns with some of their other grade 2 options. I can't remember their name. I think it's like a Mabuti, I think that's the name. But they have decent power and they have good retire options, and they're likely only going to get better as set 13 fleshes his way out. And then finally, last but not least, is Vanquisher, which thanks to Sparkin being a consistent bind option, and P-Dragon for being an insane G-Guard, and then Closer Dragon and Voltage being high power options, or you could probably sneak a game out with VMAX as well, kind of helps put it in that strong tier 2 category. So that's where I would rank the decks coming into the set, everything else being below that. And when Link Joker comes out, or has come out for Japan, then when it comes out for us, it's undoubtedly gonna call the shakeup, just because the cards within it are incredibly strong, and it props up 4 separate archetypes, which in my opinion are gonna have an impact on the meta individually in and of themselves and collectively as a clan unit, if I'm making sense. And for those that got into Vanguard a little bit later, there has been a strong Link Joker meta before there was Legions and Strides, back when we didn't have those high attacking Vanguard options. And when the Link Joker meta is upon us and where we're in the thick of it, it has an impact on rearguard heavy decks that need their rearguards to function, or decks that don't have a strong independent Vanguard such as an Iki Kashima being as an example of a strong independent Vanguard. Or in the case of spikes, we need our rear guards to be able to function, but if we have our rear guards locked down, we can't utilize them in the same form or fashion, and our Vanguards are pretty much shut off from being able to do what they need to do. So when you're in the thick of a Link Joker meta, it's gonna shape and reshape your deck because you need to account for coming face to face with a Link Joker player. And Link Joker metas are not fun, but for me they're not fun. For people that like Link Joker, I'm sure they might enjoy it. So what I'm going to do, I want to just go through what I think the tiers are going to shape up to be after the Link Joker meta, or not Link Joker meta, how I think the tiers are going to shape up after the meta has settled down and the Link Joker decks have been largely figured out and played against enough to where they've filtered their way into the meta. And what I expect to be tier 1 after this is going to be Blade Wings, Zodiac Time Beasts, Battle Sisters, and Chaos. And now why do I think that? I think Blade Wings, they still have the strong demigod combo if they have that first stride. And more or less, the Link Joker player, unless you're Chaos or Glendios, you likely won't be able to lock down enough columns or lock down their rear guard to be able to stop them from being able to utilize their remaining space to keep the demigod combo down. And if that were to fail, they still have Gilderai, which they could make more space for. They have Bladdermouth being a restanding Vanguard, and they also have strong defensive options because of Sullivan's 15 plus soul skill. So I think they still have the means to be able to stay afloat in the meta. Zodiac Time Beast for a similar fashion, because they still have all the restanding Vanguard options, and restanding Vanguards is, in my opinion and probably others' opinions, one of the biggest weaknesses of Link Joker, because they have limited PG options and their G guards aren't that good in terms of generating more shield value. They're kind of awkward in that form or fashion. So if you can keep pressuring them with 2 Vanguard attacks per turn up until you just wear their hand down, you might be able to get your way through that door and get over the top. Battle Sisters, even though they have a lot of rear guards that do more when they're not locked, they're not generation break restricted, so you might be able to get use out of them before they get locked down. So you could probably put your opponent at 3 or 4 damage before they're able to ride, and then you can just finish the game off with consecutive Iki Kashima attacks, being able to attack where they can G guard or use their gray zeros in their hand, so just kind of just keep their hand in that weird situation. And then Chaos is, I think it's going to be tier 1 because it's the most popular option, so it's going to be played a lot, and it has that discussing element about them through Chaos Breaker Deluge, because it can pull 2 cards out of your opponent's hand and then it gives them a damage, so it gives them that nice tempo swing that they can use to help them get past a difficult opponent. I know I've heard people talk about how they don't mind the -2 from hand that Deluge can offer somebody, but it's still impactful because it puts a damage on the opponent if they're at 4 or less. So they could take you from 4 to 5 through a Deluge skill, and then they can probably force their way through after they pull 2 cards out of your hand. That's kind of what made Nubatama pre-dominate a problem, an annoyance, because a lot of the discard options can add up over time if they can just chain them together. So in Chaos Breaker's case, he has the means to continually pull cards out of your opponent's hand through Universe and then through Deluge, and then use Deluge enough times that might add up to be a nuisance to where they can get through. They can set up their G zone to where they won't be impacted by other Link Joker matchups with Amnesty Messiah, so that way they can unlock their board to be able to use it going into the future turns. And as for tier 2, as you might expect from my tier 1, you didn't see Luard there, and that's because I thought he was going to end up in that tier 2 slot, because with all the Link Joker decks that are out there, they have the ability to lock down remaining units that might stay on the board for Luard's stride skill, so they won't be able to utilize it for those easy pluses. And in the case of the leaders, they can just straight up delete Luard himself and take away his stride skill, so you can't even get it on top of that. So if Link Joker has a dominating presence in the meta, it'll, in my opinion, it'll bring Luard down, because they won't be able to use Luard for what he's good for, which is his stride skill, into abusing his stride skill for Ezra's, for Owls, and then go into the grind game to then finish off with Drag Strider. And their only saving grace would be Drag Strider himself, unless they configure G-Zone to try and make use of Pokors or try to make use of that limited space with Spectral. But I don't know if that'll be consistent enough to be able to keep it from breaking into that tier 1 level again. I don't know if it'll be enough to break back into tier 1. That remains to be seen, but that's my take on it. And I also expect Blasters to be tier 2, probably incorporating Alfred and Holy Squire Dragon for easy unlocks, so that way they can keep their field going and then abuse the Flogels and with Blaster Blade again. Night Rose, I feel like it's going to be in a similar spot, because Night Rose's GB2 can help get around units that unlock, unless they relock it again in that same end phase. But that remains, I don't know, I can't remember if those skills are as common, or I don't expect those skills to be as common like the Palladiums of the world. I think Crazy 8 will still be a tier 2 deck up until we see what set 13 has to offer for spikes, just because they can keep a field vacant, and then they can still effectively utilize one clear rear guard lane to be able to use it with the Frog Raiders and the power boosting of some of their units to be able to hit over the Link Joker player, or the meta in general, not just the Link Joker player, but they can still have a decent matchup against those Link Joker players. I still expect Blade Master to remain tier 2 after the Link Joker drop, just because they can effectively retire the opponent's rear guards. Still, that doesn't go away just because Link Jokers are around, and they still have that element of Zingenberg just to be able to put repeated pressure on the opponent, because even if they are against a Link Joker matchup, they can still make use of the Vanguard ability to put pressure on them, similar to what Zodiac Time Beast can do. And they also have access to Blade Master Titan just to put critical pressure on the opponent, just to make sure that they keep using guard repeatedly, in case they use it either in between, intermittently with Zingenberg, or before Zingenberg, maybe after that they put pressure on them to reduce their hand down. They have means to abuse the opponent, not just Link Joker, but the opponent in general, to make good use of their skills, their blade skills, and just, I think they're going to remain in that tier 2 mix. Vanquisher, I feel like he's still going to be in that mix, because they have access to MP Dragon to help grind out advantage against a Link Joker player, while still having the similar matchups that they had against the other decks in the meta. The biggest problem might be the leaders, if they're a force to be reckoned with, just because they get rid of Vanquisher's stride skill, because they utilize that to get nice easy binds along the way. Wiseman, he might make it, but that's solely because Wiseman can still make use of one rearguard circle with the loop combo, and Link Joker, outside of Freeze Ray, they don't have a means to lock down the front row. And for what I've seen as of now, unless I missed it, Freeze Ray hasn't been making it into these Link Joker decks that have been seen in the meta as of now. I don't know if that's going to remain the case, but if there is a shift in Link Joker themselves that makes more use of Freeze Ray, it'll probably impact Wiseman himself, just because that's their worst matchup is a Freeze Ray deck. And after Wiseman, I think Glendios is going to end up in that tier 2 spot. I know people in my Discord say that Glendios is going to be tier 1, and they make a strong case for it, but I don't know if they're going to make it into that tier 1 spot, because the other Link Joker decks, if they float up there, will have access to Amnesty, and unless they're playing a 0 damage style deck, which I heard that the beatdown deck is becoming more in favor again, then they'll have access to Amnesty to unlock which will shut off their world end abilities as well. And if they give them damage, that opens them up for other locks as well. So I don't know if Glendios will float up there, but I know I've seen it around, and I think I've seen it in a recent top as well. Messiah in a similar boat. They're a very fair deck, and unless you utilize the multi-attacking option that's available, it's going to remain a fair deck, but they have enough to keep them afloat over other decks thanks to the strength of their lock-in. And Neo Alter Ego's GB2 just to draw 2 cards at the end of your turn because it's easy to unlock in the course of the game. And then the leaders, the most unpredictable of them out of the set. I know they got a huge boost in the set, and the thing that makes them a tier 2 deck to me, while at the same time being kind of a question mark, is that they can lock off stride skills while being aggressive on the opponent, but they need to be able to have the pieces to rebuild their board as they retire it off for skills, usually in the form of the starter and the stand trigger E-Fames. And unless you're playing the Link Jokers, I don't think, this is my limited knowledge of the leaders, but I don't think they have the tutoring ability to get those out outside of drawing them. So you might have a minor inconsistency issue there to where it might keep them from floating above that tier 2 level. And as you can tell from this list, unlike the previous list, I don't think 7 Runner is gonna remain meta relevant in this Link Joker meta, because Chaos has easy locks against them. The leaders can delete their Vanguard while not being GB related, while also having given the restanding as an option that's also is grade 3 restricted, so it's not generation break restricted. Glendios can lock them down. Messiahs can't lock them down, but I feel like they might have enough to be able to stay afloat to get through a 7 Runner deck, depending on how they play it out. So with all this Link Joker that I expect to be in the meta, I don't think 7 Runner is going to make it. And yeah, that'll do it for my meta breakdown, my state of the present meta, and then up through what I think is going to be seen in this Link with the Link Joker stuff. So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think. I kind of want to do this more often. Maybe incorporate some of my friends that I've gained through the internet, such as John Chayton, who I also did the interview with. But yeah, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this gives you an idea of the mindset and the thinking that I try to put into these things, because I try to stay cognizant of the meta, just because I know how meta, or I know I need to stay aware of it, knowing playing spikes and what I need to expect and go into things. So as I said before, hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think, and that'll do it for me. And until next time, guys, peace, be easy.